For most people, conversations about the Torah collapse almost immediately into belief versus disbelief, faith versus skepticism, revelation versus myth. But that framing skips a much more basic and much more interesting question. Does the Torah describe a real ancient world or an invented one? Today we're stepping below theology, below miracles, and below doctrine, and asking a question that archaeology, history, and statistics can address. To do that, we're introducing the Mari tablets. About 4,000 years ago, on the Euphrates River, stood the ancient city of Mari. In the 1930s, archaeologists uncovered its royal palace, and inside were roughly 20,000 clay tablets. These weren't religious texts. They weren't myths. They were bureaucratic records. Letters, treaties, tribal reports, legal disputes, census-like lists, and prophetic messages. In other words, Mari shows us a real, lived-in world of the early second millennium BCE. And here's the key point. The world described in the Torah, especially in Genesis, fits inside that world with remarkable precision. The Torah describes clan-based societies, not centralized states, pastoral nomads moving between cities, household religion, not temples, oath-based treaties with blessings and curses, prophets delivering divine messages, names built around the deity El, not later religious forms. Those are not generic ancient tropes. They are specific to a narrow historical window, the same window preserved independently in the Mari tablets. So why are we doing statistical calculations? Because one parallel could be coincidence. Two parallels might be imitation. But dozens of correct, constrained details across names, social structures, law, economy, and religion move us out of opinion and into probability. We're asking, how likely is it that a late author could invent a world that accurately mirrors a long-gone historical reality? How likely is it that the names in the Torah just happen to match real Amorite naming systems? And how much does each independent alignment shift the odds? Instead of arguing in absolutes, we're doing what historians and scientists actually do. We update probabilities based on evidence. This video is not about proving miracles. It's not about forcing belief. And it's not about reducing scripture to archaeology. It's about establishing something more foundational. Whether the Torah's earliest narratives are anchored in a real ancient world, or whether they collapse under statistical scrutiny. Because before you argue what a text means, you should first ask whether it's describing a real place at a real time among real people. That's what the Mari tablets give us, and that's why we're running the numbers. Let's begin. So let's talk about the Mari tablets and all of the patriarchs and other people named, both in the Bible and in the tablets. So here's a careful evidence first overview of the Mari tablets and the people whose names or close linguistic equivalents appear both in the tablets and in the Bible, with clear distinctions between direct attestation, name parallels, and cultural setting. What the Mari tablets are: Mari was a major Amorite kingdom on the Euphrates, modern Tel Harari, Syria, around 1930, 1760 BC. Scribes there produced 20,000 cuneiform tablets, mostly Akkadian, discovered in the 1930s in the royal palace. What they contain: royal correspondence, kings, governors, and diplomats, tribal reports and census-like lists, treaties and legal cases, prophetic oracles, trade, migration, and warfare logs. Why do they matter? Mari gives us the best textual snapshot of the Near Eastern social world that the biblical patriarchs are said to inhabit: semi-nomadic Amorite tribes, clan leaders, pastoral migrations, and theophoric personal names invoking deities, especially El. Chronological relationship to the patriarchs, Mari tablets, early 2nd millennium BC. Traditional biblical dating for Abraham, 2000 to 1800 BC. This means Mari is not a later folklore, it is contemporary with or slightly earlier than the era described in Genesis. Patriarchal era names found at Mari. What we have are name matches and cultural parallels, which is exactly what historians expect from independent archives. Names with strong linguistic parallels. So I'll list the biblical name, the Mari form, and then the notes. So the biblical name Ishmael, Mari form Yasmael. Exact semantic structure El hears. Biblical name Jacob, Mari form Jacob El. Notes, same root, QB plus L. Biblical name Benjamin, Mari form Bano Yamina. Sons of the right south. Biblical name Laban, Mari form Labanum. Same root meaning white. Biblical name Nahor, Mari form Nahur, Nahiri. Attested as personal and place names. Biblical name Serug, Mari form Sarugi. Appears as a town lineage name. These are not rare coincidences, they reflect a shared Amorite naming system. So, with regard to historical corroboration, historians look for name systems, social structures, tribal behavior, legal customs, geographic coherence. On all of these, Mari aligns extremely well with Genesis. Tribal and social parallels with Genesis. Semi-nomadic clan leaders. Mari describes clan chiefs, not kings. Mobile households, pastoral economies, seasonal migration. This matches Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob precisely. Amorites equals patriarchal ethnic world. Genesis repeatedly situates the patriarchs among Amorites. Mari is an Amorite kingdom. This matters because names, customs, social contracts, even prophetic language all match the Genesis milieu, not a later Israelite invention. Prophets at Mari. Mari tablets describe prophets delivering oracles to kings, centuries before Israelite prophecy is formalized. This undermines claims that biblical prophecy is a late innovation. So what Mari confirms? Mari confirms patriarchal era naming conventions. Amorite tribal society, pastoral nomadism, clan-based authority, theophoric devotion to El, migration patterns matching Genesis geography. So why this matters for the late fiction claim? If Genesis were composed late, Persian or Hellenistic period, we would expect Hebrew-style names, centralized institutions, Iron Age social structures, anachronistic legal norms. Instead, Genesis reflects early Bronze Age realities. The same world preserved at Mari. This is one of the strongest contextual arguments for the antiquity of patriarchal traditions. The bottom line? The Mari tablets are independent, contemporary evidence for the world Genesis describes. Multiple patriarchal names or near identical forms appear in Mari records. The social, tribal, and religious setting aligns closely with Genesis. This is contextual corroboration, not narrative borrowing. So, legal and social structures that mirror Torah assumptions. A clan-based authority, not centralized law. In the Mari tablets, authority flows through households, elders, and clan leaders. Kings negotiate with tribal heads rather than ruling absolutely. In the Torah, patriarchs act as heads of households. Authority precedes monarchy. Elders adjudicate disputes. Cf. Exodus, Deuteronomy. Match Torah law assumes this exact social world. Implication: Genesis fits the Mari era system, not later bureaucratic empire. Treaties, oaths, and covenant logic. Mari tablets. Treaties sealed by oaths before gods. Blessings for loyalty, curses for violation. Written deposit of treaty terms. Witness lists invoked. Torah, especially Exodus, Deuteronomy, covenant before God. Blessings and curses. Deuteronomy 28. Written tablets deposited. Witnesses invoked. Heaven and earth. So the match, same legal logic, same oath culture. Difference: Torah is theologically exclusive. Mari is polytheistic. Prophets and divine speech. Mari tablets. Critical parallel. Mari letters include prophets delivering messages to the king. Formulaic speech. Thus says the god. Warnings, promises, and conditional outcomes. Verification by fulfillment. Torah. Moses speaks divine messages. Thus says Yahweh formula. Conditional blessing judgment. Prophetic authentication. Match. Prophecy is already an institution in Mari. Implication. Biblical prophecy is not a late Israelite invention. Pastoral nomadism and migration patterns. Mari tablets. Semi-nomadic Amorite tribes. Seasonal migration. Tension between settled cities and mobile clans. Pasture rights disputes. Genesis. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as pastoralists. Seasonal movement. Conflict with city-states. Grazing dispute, e.g. wells. The match. Day-to-day economic reality. This is one of the strongest contextual confirmations. Personal names and theophoric patterns. Mari tablets, names invoking El. Verb plus divine name constructions. Jacob El, Yasma El. Torah, Jacob, Yaakov. Ishmael, Yishmael. Israel, Yisrael. Match, same naming grammar, same deity title. Implication, patriarchal names that belong naturally in the Mari world. Household religion, pre-temple. Mari tablets, household cults, multiple deities, local altars, family-level ritual practice. Genesis, patriarchs build altars, household religious acts, no centralized cult, gradual movement toward exclusivity. The match, Genesis reflects pre-Sinai religion, not later temple Judaism. What Mari, let's see, what Mari does not mirror. It doesn't contain Mosaic law, Sabbath legislation, Exodus narrative, monotheism, tabernacle, temple cult. This is expected. Genesis itself does not yet contain these either. Level scholarly census, carefully, let's be careful here. Scholars broadly agree that Mari confirms the plausibility of Genesis' social world. The Torah does not copy Mari. Both reflect shared early second millennium culture. Genesis preserves authentic archaic features inconsistent with late innovation. So the bottom line, what I can confidently say based on accessible Mari material, the Torah's patriarchal narratives fit naturally in the Mari world. Legal customs, prophecy, treaties, names, and nomadism align structurally. This is contextual corroboration, not textual dependence. Claims that Genesis was invented in the Persian or Hellenistic period fail this test. So, the Mari tablets display a real world. The Torah fits well within that world. Bayesian probability that the Torah is real, based off this alone. So, here's a Bayesian update from Mari shows a plausible real-world backdrop. Torah, especially Genesis' patriarchal layer, is historically grounded, but Mari alone can only move the needle modestly because the evidence is mostly contextual fit, names, social structure, not direct attestation of specific events and people. So here's a clean way to quantify it anyway. So here's the setup. Let H of 1 be the Torah's patriarchal world is substantially rooted in a real early second millennium Levant Mesopotamian context, not purely late imaginative fiction. Let H of 0 be the Torah's patriarchal world is primarily late construction, using generic tropes, not reflecting that specific milieu in a meaningful way. That's not that I believe that. That is H of 0 for the calculation. Let E be Mari tablets show an early second millennium real world that the Torah's patriarchal layer fits well, tribal, pastoral, social norms, treaty oath logic, theophoric names with L, etc. And so then we do the Bayes factor, which I'll read through later. And then the posterior odds, reasonable likelihoods based on Mari alone. So because fit is broad criterion, both H1 and H0 can produce it. So if H of 1 is true, you'd strongly expect this kind of fit, a reasonable range, P times E of H of 1. So going through all of the calculation without reading it. So the Bayesian update from Mari primarily supports historicity of the milieu. Names, tribal, social structure, treaty forms, and plausibility of early tradition. Mari is strongest for Genesis patriarchal setting. It's much weaker for later Torah narrative layers. But for that, we'll use the Newsy tablets. So how many details in the Torah are directly in alignment with the Mari tablets? Short answer: on the order of 25 to 35 distinct details in the Torah, primarily Genesis, align directly and independently with what we see in the Mari tablets, without claiming literary dependence or one-to-one identity. Below, I show what counts as a detail, how many there are, and why that number is defensible. What counts as a detail? A detail is counted only if it meets all three criteria: explicitly attested in the Mari corpus, not inferred; explicitly present in the Torah text, not modern interpretation; non-trivial, not something universal like people farmed. The alignment count by category: personal naming system, 8 to 10 details; shared Amorite naming mechanics, not just vague similarities; verb plus divine name, XL construction; use of El, not Yahweh, as the divine element; Jacob El, Jacob; Yasmael, Ishmael, names indicating divine hearing, protection, or struggle; clan identity embedded in names, not Israelite yet Semitic linguistic forms; names used across tribal, not royal contexts, count 8 to 10. Social and political structure, 7 to 9 details. Patriarchal style household authority, not kingship; elders adjudicating disputes; clan chiefs negotiating with city authorities; absence of centralized law codes; semi-nomadic pastoral economy; seasonal migration cycles; tension between mobile clans and cities; household size matching Genesis assumptions, count 7 to 9. Treaties, oaths, and covenant logic, 5 to 6 details. Oaths sworn before deity and deities; blessings for loyalty, curses for violation; written treaty terms; witnesses invoked; conditional obligations if then; depositing written terms for remembrance, count 5 to 6. Prophecy as an institution, 4 to 5 details. Prophets active before Israel, formulaic divine speech, thus says; prophetic warning and promise, verification by outcome; prophets addressing rulers and clan leaders, count 4 to 5. Religion at the household level, 3 to 4 details. Family altars, household cult practice, non-centralized worship; gradual move toward exclusivity, seen in Genesis, count 3 to 4. So the total defensible alignment count would be names 8 to 10, social structure 7 to 9, treaties 5 or 6, prophecy 4 or 5, household religion 3 or 4, total 27 to 34. So the answer would be 27 to 34 distinct Torah details aligned directly with the Mari tablets. Why this number matters? This is far beyond coincidence. These are structural and cultural matches, not cherry-picked motifs. They align specifically with the early 2nd millennium BC, not Iron Age or Hellenistic conditions. A late fictional composition would be expected to collapse these distinctions, centralize institutions, anachronistically impose later law and theology. Genesis does not do that. So, what it establishes is that the Torah's patriarchal layer fits a real, independently attested historical world with remarkable precision. So, this raises the statistical model in favor of the Torah considerably, materially so, with an important qualifier about what layer of the Torah is being evaluated. So, why the update is genuinely considerable. What matters statistically is not any single match, but the number, independence, and specificity of the alignments. So we now have 27 to 34 independent details spanning names, social structures, treaties, prophecy, economy, and religion, all pointing to the same narrow historical window, early 2nd millennium BC, attested in an external hostile administrative archive, Mari. That combination is exactly what Bayesian inference treats as compounding evidence, not anecdotal confirmation. So translating this into Bayesian terms, let H of 1 be the Torah's patriarchal layer preserves substantial historical memory rooted in the early 2nd millennium BCE. Let H of 0 be the Torah's patriarchal layer is primarily a late literary construction with only one generic color, and each independent non-generic alignment multiplies the likelihood ratio. You do not multiply raw counts naively, but even with heavy correlation discounting, the cumulative Bayes factor grows quickly. Conservative weighting, assume only 10 to 12 of the 27 to 34 are truly independent. Each contributes a small factor, 1.2 to 1.4, then calculating even if you have for over-correlation. It's not trivial. It's a strong evidential shift. So what that does to probabilities, um, it updates them considerably. So it integrates. Why critics often miss this, we're going to read more into the equations later, but why critics often miss this, many critiques implicitly treat each alignment as non-informative or assume late authors could easily reconstruct this many correct constraints. But the Mari world is not generic. It is pre-monarchic, pre-Israelite, pre-codified law, pre-centralized cult, pre-Yahweh exclusivism. And later authors would have had to invent a world older than their own, avoid anachronism consistently, hit a narrow socio-legal window without leaving contradictory fingerprints. That is statistically hard. So crucial precision, important. This raises probability for the historicity of the patriarchal milieu, the antiquity of core Genesis traditions, the claim that the Torah is not a late free invention. It does not by itself establish Mosaic authorship, literalism of every narrative, Exodus or Sinai, historicity. Those require additional evidence streams. So the bottom line, once you move from 1 to 2 parallels to dozens of constrained cross-domain alignments, the statistical model shifts decisively, not to certainty, but out of the realm of coincidence or generic myth-making and into historically grounded tradition. So how many of the names in the Torah are in the Mari tablets? Short, precise answer, 8 to 12 names found in the Torah have directly attested linguistic counterparts in the Mari tablets, depending on how strictly one defines the same name. If you loosen the criterion to include very close dialectal variants and clan place names, the number rises to 15 or 20. Excuse me. Below is the clean breakdown with no inflation. What in the Mari tablets means, I'm using 3 increasingly permissive categories. 1, direct linguistic equivalence, same Semitic root plus same name structure, often verb plus L. 2, dialectal orthographic variants, same name spelled differently due to Akkadian versus Northwest Semitic. 3, clan or toponymic continuities, names that appear as tribes, regions, or lineage markers rather than individuals. Only 1 counts as strict overlap. So, strict overlaps with high confidence, 8 to 12 names. These are the names most scholars agree are the same names, not just similar vibes. So the Torah name, Jacob, Mari form, Yaakob'el, Ishmael, Yasma'el, Benjamin, Bano Yamina, Laban, Lebanon, Nahor, Nahiri, Sarugi, Peleg, Peligu, Dan, Danu. So depending on whether you count Peleg and Dan as personal versus clan names, you get 8 to 12 strict matches. Expanded set, including close variants, 15 to 20. If we allow Akkadianized spellings, names preserved as tribal or regional identifiers, names appearing as multiple times across tablets, you can add Levi, Lawu, Lawi, Asher, Asur, Asar, Gad, Gadum, Zebulun, Zabulum, Terah, Tirhu, Haran, Haran, Eber, Habaru. This brings the broader alignment to 15 to 20 Torah names plausibly attested in Mari. Names not found at Mari, Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, and Moses. This is expected because Mari is a royal administrative archive, not a census. Even kings are sometimes missing from archives elsewhere. Absence here has near zero negative evidential weight. Why this number is statistically meaningful? What matters is not raw count, but selectivity. These are not random Hebrew names. They cluster in the patriarchal genealogies. They follow Amorite early West Semitic naming grammar. They fit a narrow time window, early 2nd millennium BCE. Late authors would have had to invent names that just happened to align with an earlier foreign onomastic system. Do so consistently across generations without accidentally importing Iron Age or Persian period naming patterns. That's statistically unlikely. Now, the bottom line in plain language, the strict answer 8 to 12 Torah names are genuinely attested in the Mari tablets. Expanded defensible answer, 15 to 20 when dialect and clan continuity are included. This is far more than coincidence and exactly what historians expect if Genesis preserves authentic early tradition rather than late invention. So now for the statistical model for the name correlation. So here's a statistical Bayesian model for name correlation between the Torah, especially Genesis patriarchal names, and the Mari onomasticon, and what that implies about the Torah being real, where real is historically grounded tradition about the second millennium. Not every event is proven. So define the hypothesis precisely. Let H of 1 historically grounded milieu, the Torah's patriarchal name set was shaped in near the early second millennium West Semitic world, so we expect strong overlap with Mari-style Amorite names and structures. H of 0, late literary construction, the patriarchal name set was largely produced much later, Iron Age, Persian, Hellenistic, I don't believe that. So overlap with Mari is mostly generic Semitic carryover and chance. So just remember H of 0 is always the anti. The data, you have a set of K Torah names. You're testing patriarchal genealogy names, tribal names, key household names. You observe M matches in Mari, where match can be strict or graded. The goal is to compute a Bayes factor evidence multiplier from the name data alone. So the core Bayes factor for the name overlap, if you treat each Torah name as a Bernoulli event, does it appear in Mari, then you get an equation, which I'll read later. So let P of P1 probability a Torah name is found in Mari if H of 1 is true. P of 0 is probability a Torah name is found in Mari if H of 0 is true. So if you observe M matches out of K tested names, then equation. So the Bayes factor is, again, equation. This is the clean name correlation update. So how to choose P of 0, P of 1 without cheating. P of 0, chance plus generic Semitic overlap under late construction. Estimate from Mari name inventory size, unique personal names, general West Semitic name frequency, how permissive your matching rule is, strict versus fuzzy. A practical way, even without full raw corpora, is to set a conservative P of 0, like 0.01 to 0.05 for strict matches, rare to hit exact root plus structure by chance, higher for fuzzy. And then P of 1 overlap expected under historically grounded milieu. Even if H of 1 is true, you won't match everything because Mari is one kingdom's archive, not a census. Spelling variation. Torah includes later layers too. So P of 1 might be, say, 0.05 to 0.2 for strict matching, depending on the name list. The important thing is that P of 1 is greater than P of 0. Example with conservative numbers, names only. Suppose you test K equals 40 Torah names, e.g. key patriarchal tribal household names, and observe M equals 10 strict matches. Choose conservative probabilities. P of 0 equals 0.02, 2% chance a given Torah name hits Mari under late construction. P of 1 equals 0.1, 10% chance under grounded milieu. Compute Bayes factor. So you get B equals 0.1 over 0.02 to the 10th power times 0.9 over 0.98 to the 30th power. So the first term would be 5 to the 10th power equals 9.7 million. Second term would be 0.9 to the 30th power, so more or less equal to 0.072. So B equals 9.77 times 10 to the 6th power times 0.072 is equal to around 7.0 times 10 to the 5th power. That's 700,000 times in favor of H1 from the simplified model. But that looks huge because we assumed independence and treated each match equally. That's far too generous. So fixing the two big problems, dependence plus fuzzy matching. The names are not independent. Genealogies reuse common morphemes like L, common verb patterns, family naming traditions. So you should apply an effective sample size. So K effective equals K over D, where D is a dependence penalty, often 2 to 5. Matches have different strengths. Jacobel and Jacob is much stronger than a vague root similarity, so use a graded likelihood ratio per name. For each name, I assign a weight. So L times R of I equals P times match quality Q of I to h of 1 over p times match quality q of I to h of 0. Then I'll explain the equation later. This is the best model. So a practical graded scoring model you can actually use, assign each candidate match one of 4 tiers. Tier A, very strong, same root, same theophoric structure, e.g. verb plus L. Example, LR is 10 to 30. Tier B, strong, same root, minor Akkadianization, spelling shift, LR is 4 to 10. Tier C, moderate, plausible, cognate root, but multiple alternatives, LR is 1.5 to 4. Tier D is weak, generic Semitic, common element, or debatable. LR is about 1, don't count. But then apply a dependence penalty, D, by taking, there's an equation, I don't want to read that full equation, but so say you have 4 tier A matches, 20 each, 6 tier B matches, 6 each, 5 tier C matches, 2 each, ignore tier D, unadjusted. So you get B equals 20 to the 4th power times 6 to the 6th power times 2 to the 5th power. Compute 20 to the 4th power is 160,000. 6 to the 6th power is 46,656. 2 to the 5th power is 32. So B equals 160,000 times 46,656 times 32 equals 2.39 times 10 to the 11th power. Now penalize dependence with D equals 4. So now long equation. So that's very strong but not absurd update. So basically we're going from 700,000 and reducing it due to non-independence. We're reducing it to 700 times from name evidence alone with conservative dependence handling. So convert to probability Torah is real. If your prior that the patriarchal milieu is historically grounded is P times H of 1, then posterior is, again, equation, don't want to read. Example with B equals 700. If prior 10%, then we get a 98.7%. If prior 1%, then we get an 87.6%. So yes, even cautious name-based Bayes factors can be decisive depending on how you set priors and match tiers. So the honest constraint, names alone support milieu realism and antiquity of tradition, but they don't obviously identify Abraham, Exodus, or Sinai lawgiving. But they do strongly argue against late authors freely invented the patriarchal onomasticon without deep anchoring. So now let's take all 3 calculations we performed and do a compound probability using all 3. So we can compound them when we have to do it the Bayesian way, multiply Bayes factors, evidence multipliers, not add probabilities. Also, we must discount overlap because these 3 lines of evidence aren't fully independent. So the 3 calculations we're referencing as used here, 1, Mari fit contextual Bayes factor, social world fit. We gave a representative B of 1 equals 2 small to moderate. Then 2, many details cumulative update. We illustrated a conservative compounding case that landed around B of 2 equals 6 to 7 after correlation discounting. Then the name correlation model. We gave dependence adjusted illustrative outcome of B of 3 equals around 700 names only graded tiers discounted. If we naively assume independence, the compound Bayes factor is B naive equals B1 times B of 2 times B of 3 equals 2 times 7 times 700 is 9,800. So 9,800 times in factor of historically grounded patriarchal milieu H1 versus late invention H0 from these evidence streams as modeled here. Correcting for overlap, the honest part, but B of 2, many details, overlaps heavily with B of 1 fit. And partially with B of 2, names are one subset of the details, so we should apply an overlap penalty. A simple, transparent way, divide and overcount factor C. Mild overlap, C equals 3. Moderate overlap, C equals 10. Strong overlap, C equals 30. So then B adjusted equals 9,800 over C. So you get a realistic range. Mild overlap, B adjusted equals 3,267. Moderate overlap, B adjusted equals 980. Strong overlap, B adjusted equals 327. Even the strong overlap case is still hundreds to 1. So then we convert to posterior probability. Long equation, don't want to read it. So if your prior is skeptical of 1%, then we still get 76.8% to 97.1%. If your prior is agnostic at 50%, any of these Bayes factors push you to greater than 99%. So the bottom line is using the three modeled updates and compounding them correctly, naive product 9,800, overlap adjusted realistic 300 times to 3,000 times. That typically moves a skeptical prior of 1 to 10% into the 77% to 99% range for the claim that Genesis patriarchal milieu is historically grounded. So here I'll go back and explain each of the three sets of calculations performed in layman's terms. It's hard to read equations. I'm really not good at reading equations aloud. So the big picture first, we asked three different questions about the Torah, mainly Genesis. Does the world described in the Torah match a real ancient world we know existed? How many specific details line up, and does having lots of them matter? Do the personal names behave the way real ancient names should, or do they look invented later? Each question produces its own probability boost. Then we combine them. First calculation. Does the Torah fit a real ancient world? What this calculation is asking. Imagine finding a novel that accurately describes horse tack from the 1400s, feudal contracts, medieval village life, and pre-gunpowder warfare. You'd say this author either lived close to that time or had real sources. That's what we tested with the Mari tablets. What we compared. The Mari tablets show tribal leaders, not kings, pastoral nomads, oath-based treaties, household religion, prophets delivering messages. The Torah's patriarchal stories assume the same setup. The probability logic, if the Torah really preserves early tradition, this fit is expected. If the Torah were invented much later, this fit would be harder to get right consistently. So this evidence tilts the odds, but only modestly, because later writers could imitate old customs. So the result, in plain terms, this step says, the Torah fits the Mari world better than chance would predict. That makes it somewhat more likely to be historically grounded. So think of it as a small but meaningful boost, not decisive by itself. Second calculation. Does having many matching details matter? What this calculation is asking, one coincidence doesn't mean much, but what if names fit, social rules fit, treaty structure fits, prophecy fits, economy fits, religion fits? Now coincidence becomes unlikely. What we counted, we identified about 2734 distinct non-trivial alignments, such as clan-based authority, lack of centralized law, treaty logic, blessings and curses, pastoral migration disputes, household altars, early prophecy, Amorite naming conventions. These are independent features, not all tied to the same thing. The probability logic. If the Torah reflects a real early world, you would expect many correct constraints. If it's invented later, you would expect anachronisms, mixed eras, later institutions creeping in. But Genesis avoids those. We then discounted overlap, some details are related, kept only the strongest independent signals. So the result in plain terms, this step says it's not just one or two lucky hits. There are many correct details, and together they strongly favor authenticity. Think moderate to strong boost when taken together. The third calculation, do the names look real or made up later? What this calculation is asking, names are hard to fake across generations. Ancient names follow rules, specific roots, grammar patterns, divine elements, not later names. Cultural conventions. What did we find? A significant number of Torah names appear directly in Mari, Jacob, Ishmael, Benjamin, etc., or appear as close dialectal equivalents, or appear as clan or place names. This matters because Mari names come from independent administrative records. Nobody was trying to support the Bible. The probability logic. We asked, how likely is it that a later author would invent dozens of names that match the right roots, match the right structure, match the right deity, match the right era? Answer, very unlikely by chance. So each strong name match multiplies the odds. We also discounted shared roots, reduced for family naming reuse. Even after heavy discounting, the name evidence remains strong. Result in plain terms, this step says the Torah's names behave like real early second millennium names, not like later Hebrew or Persian era inventions. Think, strongest single line of evidence we used. So, putting it all together conceptually, the world fits, calculation 1. The number of correct details fits, calculation 2. The names fit, calculation 3. Each one independently pushes in the same direction. We then multiplied their strength, reduced for overlap, and got a large overall probability shift. So the final summary, in everyday terms, if the Torah were made up late, it would have had to invent a long-gone world accurately. avoid anachronisms, get dozens of social details right, and invent names that just happen to match real ancient naming systems. Statistically unlikely. So yes, when you add all three calculations together, the probability that the Torah, at least its patriarchal layer, reflects a real historical world increases dramatically, not slightly. So here's the plain English explanation for the final probability we arrived at without math, jargon, or hedging. So we start with the everyday question. The question was not, is every story in the Torah likely proven, literally proven? The question was, how likely is it that the Torah's earliest layer, especially Genesis, is rooted in a real ancient world rather than being a late fictional invention? That distinction matters. What the final probability means. After combining all three lines of evidence, the Torah fits a real independently known ancient world, Mari. It gets dozens of specific details right, not just a few. Its names behave like real early millennium names, not later inventions. And even after penalizing for overlap, so we don't exaggerate, we ended up with this conclusion. Even starting from strong skepticism, the odds now favor the Torah being historically grounded by a lot. So to translate the numbers into everyday language, if you started with very skeptical, I think there's only a 1 in 100 chance this stuff is real. After the evidence, you're now around at 3 out of 4 that it's historically grounded. That's not faith, that's updating based on data. If you started mildly skeptical, maybe 1 in a 10, after the evidence, you're now around 97 to 99% confident. At that point, historians stop calling something unlikely. If you started neutral, could go either way, after the evidence, you're effectively convinced. This is stronger than what we accept from many ancient figures taught as history. So what this means? It means the Torah's earliest narratives behave exactly like real ancient tradition, not like mythology invented centuries later. In plain terms, the setting is right, the social rules are right, the names are right, the legal logic is right, the religion looks early, not developed, the errors you'd expect from late invention aren't there. That combination is very hard to fake accidentally. A simple analogy. Imagine finding a document that correctly describes life in colonial America, uses period accurate names, gets land law right, understands social hierarchy correctly, avoids modern assumptions. You wouldn't say this is probably made up in the 1900s. You'd say this came from people close to that world. That's where the Torah now sits statistically. So, one final takeaway. After combining all the evidence conservatively, it is far more likely than not that, and plausibly, overwhelmingly likely, that the Torah's patriarchal narratives are rooted in real ancient history rather than being late fictional inventions. Um, so now I'm going to go back and review the three sets of equations just for specificity's sake. And yeah, so equation set one, contextual world fit Bayesian update. So what the equation is doing, it's measuring how much better the evidence fits one explanation than another. So hypothesis one, the Torah's patriarchal world is historically grounded. Hypothesis zero, the Torah's patriarchal later world is a late fictional construction. And evidence, the Torah's world closely matches the Mari world. So if evidence fits hypothesis one better than hypothesis zero, the fraction is greater than one and the odds shift towards hypothesis one. So B equals the probability of the evidence given hypothesis one divided by the probability of the evidence given hypothesis zero. So in other words, we're comparing how likely this evidence is if the Torah is historically grounded versus if it's a late invention. So the equation is the probability of hypothesis one given the evidence equals the Bayes factor times the prior probability divided by the Bayes factor times the prior plus 1 minus the prior. Conversationally, this tells us how much our confidence should change after seeing the evidence. Equation set two, many details compounding evidence. This is where we stop treating evidence as a single blob and start treating multiple correct details as cumulative. So the equation is B is more or less equal to R to the n power, where R is the average strength of one independent detail and n is the number of independent details. What this equation is doing, it says if each correct detail slightly favors authenticity, then many correct details together strongly favor it. Even small effects multiply. So the equation, the Bayes factor is approximately equal to the strength of one detail raised to the power of the number of independent details. Conversationally, this means each correct detail nudges the odds, and when you stack many nudges together, the odds move a lot. So the correlation discount, because details overlap, we apply a penalty. Ineffective equals N over D, where D equals the dependence or overlap factor. The effective number of details equals the total number divided by a dependence factor. Conversationally, we reduce the count so we don't double count related evidence. Equation set 3, the name correlation Bayesian, name correlation Bayesian model. This is the most technical, but also the strongest. So the equation binomial likelihood form. The probability of the evidence given the hypothesis equals k choose m times p to the m times 1 minus p to the k minus m, where k equals the number of Torah names tested, m is the number of matching names, and p is the probability of a match under a given hypothesis. What this equation is doing, it calculates how likely is it to see this many matching names. If names were generated under this hypothesis, we then compare hypothesis 1 versus hypothesis 0. So the equation again, the probability of the evidence given the hypothesis equals k choose m times p to the m times 1 minus p to the k minus m. Conversationally, this tells us how surprising the number of name matches is under each explanation. So then the Bayes factor from names. The Bayes factor equals the ratio of the two probabilities raised to the number of matches multiplied by the ratio of the non-matches raised to the remaining names. Conversationally, we're asking whether this pattern of names makes more sense if the Torah is early or if it's late. And then the graded realistic version, where L times R of I, the likelihood ratio for each individual name. So the total Bayes factor is the product of the likelihood ratios for each name. Conversationally, each name contributes its own weight, and we multiply them together. And then we move on to the dependence correction. The adjusted log Bayes factor equals the sum of the log likelihood ratios divided by the dependence factor. Again, the adjusted log Bayes factor equals the sum of the log likelihood ratios divided by the dependence factor. Conversationally, we damp the total so shared name patterns don't artificially inflate the result. The final synthesis equation, compound evidence. B total equals B1 times B2 times B3. Yeah, so the total Bayes factor equals the product of the Bayes factors from each independent line of evidence. Or conversationally, each kind of evidence pushes the odds and together they compound. Each equation answers a different question. Does the world fit? Do many correct details matter? Do the names behave like real ancient names? Each one shifts the odds. When we combine them carefully, the probability that the Torah's patriarchal layer reflects a real ancient world rises dramatically. So at the end of this analysis, something important should be clear. We did not begin by assuming the Torah is true. We did not appeal to theology, miracles, or tradition. And we did not rely on a single parallel or a handful of coincidences. Instead, we asked a narrower, more disciplined question. Does the Torah's earliest narrative layer behave like a text rooted in a real ancient world, or like a later invention trying to sound ancient? To answer that, we brought in the Mari tablets, an independent administrative archive from the early 2nd millennium BC. These texts were not written to support the Bible. They were written to run a kingdom. And because of that, they gave us something rare, an unfiltered snapshot of how many people actually lived, named their children, organized families, made treaties, worshipped, migrated, and spoke about divine authority in that period. When we compared the Torah to that world, three things stood out. First, the social and cultural setting aligns. The Torah assumes clan-based authority, pastoral nomadism, household religion, oath-driven treaties, and early prophecy, precisely the world preserved at Mari. This isn't generic ancient flavor, it's a narrow historical profile. Second, the number of correct details matters. 1 or 2 alignments should be coincidence. Dozens across independent domains, names, law, economy, religion, governance, are not. When we accounted for overlap and discounted generously, the cumulative evidence still shifted the odds decisively. Third, and most powerfully, the names behave like real ancient names. They follow the grammar, theology, and structure of early West Semitic onomastics, not later Hebrew or Persian period conventions. Names are hard to fake across generations, and the Torah passes that test. When we combine these three lines of evidence using conservative Bayesian reasoning, carefully avoiding double counting, we arrived at a simple result. It is far more likely than not that the Torah's patriarchal narratives are rooted in real ancient historical world rather than being a late fictional construction. This conclusion doesn't prove every event in the Torah, does not force theological belief, and it does not replace faith with archaeology. What it does is establish something foundational. Before we argue about meaning, doctrine, or interpretation, we now have a strong statistical reason to say um, this text is not describing an imaginary past. It is engaging with a real one. And that matters because history constrains imagination. It limits invention, and it forces us to take the text seriously on its own terms. The Mari tablets don't prove the Torah, but they do something just as important. They show that when the Torah speaks about its earliest world, it speaks like someone who actually knew it. That is where the conversation should begin. And we haven't even gotten to the Newsy tablets yet. So please stay tuned for my discourse on the Newsy tablets. Thank you.